Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Bash Harry, this is the Harry Knit. We do a lot of fiber arts, particularly knitting, and this is what this video is about, so if you're interested, please do hit the like button, subscribe, and comment down below, because we're talking about knitting non-essentials, or the knitting tools and notions you don't need, because I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been purchasing quite a lot of tools over the past year, really the past 6 months. I went back from my honeymoon and I just found myself getting a lot of notions, not just yarn, and it got me thinking about what are essential, what are optional, and what are things you don't need. So this is what this video is about. I'm going to be sharing with you guys the tools that I think you can skip and what you don't need, and some better alternatives instead. Obviously, these are just my opinions and my opinions alone. If you disagree or you think that there should be some tools you don't need, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. I would love to have a discussion. We're all open to discussing and just talking about what is really essential, because what's not essential for me might be essential for you and vice versa. But enough chatting. I want to talk a little bit about the cardigan that I'm wearing. This is by Lily Kate Makes. I made this last year. This is West Yorkshire Spinners 4-ply, I believe, in the color Butterscotch. I love yellow. I wear a lot of yellow on a daily basis, and yet this is, I think, the only yellow item I've made in a while, which is weird. I really love yellow and I don't wear this often enough. I feel like it's such a joyous color, and I love the little puff sleeve. It's very Cinderella. Initially in the pattern she recommends mohair, but I think I wanted a more solid look. I didn't want anything too transparent or translucent that mohair would give, so I wanted just the same color, so I just ended up using the same one. And then these buttons I just got from the local Hobby Lobby. We don't have a Hobby Lobby. It's just the local hobby store here. It took me like 3 months to finish. Not even 3 months. It took me a while to finish, because for the longest time I was in a really bad knitting slump 2 years ago. And then I did not work on this project for like 2 months, not even 2 months, probably like 6 months to 8 months. And then when I finally got my knitting mojo back, I finished it within like 2 weeks. So this was a while, but thankfully it's finished. I finished it last year. I just wanted to show it off. I think this is, I forgot what it's called. There's so many names, but I definitely know that Lily Kate Makes made it, and she's a really great designer, and I love the cardigan. Just absolutely love it. Anyway, I wanted to talk about knitting non-essentials, or things that you don't need, because we are usually emboldened to get new stuff, especially me, because I like getting new knitting tools and gadgets. But there are some that after using them for a while, I don't necessarily think you need, but it's nice to have. So the first one that I want to talk about, which I don't have right now, is the row counter. A row counter is like a manual or digital row counter where you just like click a button and then it'll tell you the time or the number of times you do something. And it does help keep track, especially when you're doing like multiple rows of stockinette or something that's super mindless. However, for me, I don't use them. I've never really needed to use them, because when I'm working on stockinette, most of the time the patterns will just call for knit until X amount of inches or centimeters, and so I'll just follow that. If they said do 24 rows of this, I will just, do a tally mark next to the pattern, whether that is in pencil or I'm using my iPad. It's easier to just jot it down. Whereas I don't really see the need for a row counter that's physical unless you don't really have access to the iPad, but even then you have paper and you can always just do tally marks. For me personally, I just don't see this as a requirement or a necessity at the age that we are now, at this digital age where it's quite easy to print, and even analog where you just do pen and paper feels a lot more easier than just using a row counter. That being said, I have been toying with the idea of getting a row counter simply because I think it does look a little cool, and I've been seeing a lot of cool row counters, but as of now, I'm putting it in the knitting tools that are not necessary category. And speaking of tools that are not completely necessary, I don't have an example here right now, but one thing that I don't usually buy are fancy project bags. Yes, you do need a project bag, usually when you're taking your yarn out, when you're knitting on the go, but I don't think you need one that's like super expensive and fancy. Yes, it's helpful to keep your project organized, and there's so many various options. So I don't understand why. Well, I guess I can understand why, but I don't think at this stage, especially if you're a beginner or you're just a semi-regular hobbyist when it comes to knitting, that you need like a super fancy project bag that's made of leather and it's $250 and it has all of this stuff. I don't think that's completely necessary. For me, what I use is a very simple lunch bag that my mom made. She's made quite a couple because she knows how to sew, and I just stuff my yarn inside it. It's not the fanciest, it's not the prettiest, but it keeps my yarn and my project inside a bag that I could put in my other bag. I'm not saying don't buy a project bag, because obviously you probably need one. I'm saying don't get a super fancy, super expensive project bag that you don't really need right now. When I was a kid, I used to bring a knitting bag everywhere I went inside like my little pocket, and it had like my stitch markers and my knitting needles, and that was made by my mom. It wasn't an expensive bag, mostly because she gave it to me, but it was something that was really helpful on the go. If you don't want to spend that money, what you can do instead is just get a tote bag. It's simple, it's easy. And if I want to go a step further, maybe find a bag that has inner pockets just to keep anything that I might need, like a stitch marker or a darning needle. That's pretty much all you really need. You don't really need a really fancy, kind of many times I say really, you don't need a fancy schmancy bag that's like the most expensive, most amazing thing you've ever seen. You just need a simple project bag. The other thing that I don't think is an essential, but I'm 50-50 on this, is a needle set. I am 50-50 on this because I actually have an expensive needle set. I have the Knit Pro knitting needles. I got these last year, and I'm not gonna lie, they changed my life completely. I don't have 4.5 right now because I'm working on a pattern using that. But this actually has been a great thing for me, especially the past year. However, I didn't start with this. I spent a long time knitting without a needle set, and that was perfectly fine. Interchangeable knitting needles are truly a game changer, especially if you just want to get more in depth into more interesting patterns. Knitting needle sets are amazing once you save up the money and you know that you want to knit for a very long time. For me, I didn't start off with this. When I first started knitting, I was like 12 years old. I was very, very bad, and I didn't get the set until last year. What I would recommend instead, especially if you're a beginner, is to start off with circular needles. So I also have a needle set. My mom made this. Thank you, Mom. She made this needle set where I used to keep all of my little knitting needles right here, my circular needles. And this was all the needles that I had when I was younger. And I still use some of them, not gonna lie. They're like mixed with metals and plastic and wood. My DPNs are here. They have been great for me when I was younger, especially when I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was more interested in accessories and little soft toys and hats at the time, so that was perfectly fine for me. And then a few years ago, when I was getting really back into knitting again after uni, after I graduated, I instead decided to purchase individual interchangeable needles. And I will say this one's a little bit more expensive. Overall, it was very helpful for my budget. So this is the Knit Pro Symphony Wood set. Obviously, this is not the full set because I was just purchasing the needles when I needed it. And I accumulated these over the past 2-3 years. I just buy some individually. Because sometimes, you know, it was worth it to buy needles for £4 rather than purchasing a huge needle set for 189 pounds at the time. So this was really helpful for me. And just a quick story, I lost these for 2 years. I didn't know where I put them. And then when me and my husband got married and we were moving in and cleaning everything up, I found them and I was so happy. I was like so shocked. That was the reason why I lost my knitting mojo in 2022, was because I lost these and then I just could not be asked to knit again because I was just so sad about losing them. But now that I found them, I have like 2 sets of needle sets and I'm like, dang, I have a lot more needles than I thought now. But yeah, definitely recommend doing that instead. Obviously, it would be good, especially if you're a beginner, to just gradually increase your knitting needle collection and then eventually purchase a big needle set. I wouldn't say purchase a needle set immediately. I think wait a year, even if you do have the funds, because you never know. You just don't end up liking knitting anyway. You don't want to spend how much money on a needle set where it just collects dust. Thankfully, I really do enjoy knitting, which is why I have so many needles. And I think that's a good thing. I think it was smart of me at the time when I was younger just to knit projects with the needles I actually do have. And now I've upgraded and purchased a more expensive one. That being said, knitting tools can be expensive, and needle sets are definitely one of the more expensive purchases you can get. I'll talk a little bit more in maybe another video one of these days, but for now, that's all I can recommend. Another thing that I say is not an essential tool, and I don't think people would say it is essential, but it is fancy stitch markers. Fancy stitch markers are so pretty, don't get me wrong. They are really, really pretty, but I think the simple ones that you can get work just as effectively. So for example, I'm gonna take out my little stitch holder. I've been using this for years. It has all my knitting tools. I bought these from White Rabbit Handmade when I was in Australia last month, like 2 months ago. And these are just heart stitch markers that I got from them. And I absolutely love them. They're so cute. But they're also a little bit more expensive than my regular stitch markers like these, which I have gotten a long time ago. These are just very simple stitch markers that I've gotten over the past few years. And they have been so effective. These locking stitch markers as well have been in my arsenal for a very, very long time. I don't think you need like the fanciest stitch markers or accessories when you're working on a project, because honestly, these work just as well. They don't have to be like the prettiest thing ever, especially if they're just projects that you use. I don't think they're necessary. I don't think the fancy ones are absolutely necessary, but they are a very nice treat for yourself, especially if you just want something a little bit more aesthetic. I didn't get fancy stitch markers until literally when I went to Bendigo, and that was it. I did get some like stitch markers for free. Like whenever I'm purchasing yarn, this was a stitch marker I got, and it was really cute. I use these whenever I'm like working on a sock. I would just attach it so I know which one's like sock 1 and sock 2, but that's about it really. This one's a bit too small to work on, like if I needed to attach it to as an example, a 5mm knitting needle, like this is way too small. The little hook area is too small to attach to a 6 or 7mm hook. But to attach it to a sock or like just to count the rows of a sweater, I think it's perfectly fine. So you can see right there. And just to add on to that, I think that needle protectors are actually quite necessary. Things like this. You don't need to get fancy ones like these. I do like these. I also got these from White Rabbit Handmade. These say made with love, but I still use these little needle stoppers a lot of the time because they're cute. That being said, I do get a lot of side eyes when I take these out of my knitting needles, and then my friends are like, what is that? And I was like, they're needle stoppers. They're so cute. They're like, they look weird. I was like, shut up. They're not. They're useful. This is just me saying don't buy expensive, fancier alternatives to actual essential tools. I'll have like a full video that talks about essential tools maybe in the next few weeks, but we're talking about non-essentials and we're now getting into the nitty-gritty. And the next thing that I have that I want to talk about are yarn dispensers. So I got this. This is a yarn dispenser that I got from Knit Pro. And in theory, I like it. Like, it helps a lot, especially when I'm working from the side instead of the center. I got this when I was in Singapore. I purchased it at Yarning Hearts, and I do like it. It is nice, but I don't think it's completely necessary, especially since I do work from the center a lot of the time, because it's just easier for me personally. This is only helpful if I am sitting at home and I'm watching something and I need it to pull. That being said, it has fallen on me, I think at least 2 to 3 times right now. I think at one point it did fall in a video because I was just pulling it a little bit too hard. So it didn't make any sense to me to purchase this after a while, knowing that the yarn or me pulling it was causing too much friction, and then it just pulled against it and then it fell off the table. So you have to be really careful when you're working with something like this. And it was quite expensive. I think it was about $40, with the exchange rate and just cost of everything. It was pretty expensive, all things considered. But it is very nice, I will say. What I used to use was a kitchen towel holder, a kitchen roll holder. Did not have the spinning like that, so it was very short-lived. But it's nice. I just don't think I use it as often as I thought I would, because I just don't. And adding on to that, another thing that I don't think is necessary, that you don't need, is a knitting caddy. So this one I got from Cat and Sparrow Fibers. I know that I talked about it in a video that I got as a haul, and I do love it as a concept. I think it's fun, it's nice. Why I don't think it's necessary goes along with what I said earlier. Yes, you can travel with this, but I think because of the way that I knit sitting down. So I knit like this, but the way that I sit down kind of affects the knitting caddy. So it's like, it's not sitting where it's supposed to sit. So if I'm sitting down and I'm knitting, it just kind of flops around. It really only works when I'm walking around, and I don't walk and run. I don't knit and walk. It's not very safe. I've learned my lesson on that. The only time I would actually use this is if I had like a bag hook on a table, attach it to the yarn, attach the knitting caddy to it, and then knit like that, which I feel like is just a lot of effort. So I like this in theory, but I do want to get a bag hook to really utilize this. Again, there are so many cheaper, freer alternatives, which is simply to get a project bag and just put it next to you and just knit along. I feel like that's fine. I'm not going to say I regret this purchase because it's supporting a local business in Australia, and I do like the idea of it. I feel like I just need some more time to get used to it and working like out and about with my knitting to really say this was worth it for me. But even if it is worth it for me, it is not a knitting essential. It's just something nice to have. And one final thing that I say is not a necessity, something that I purchased, and I'm not going to say I regret it. I don't think you need expensive blocking mats. I bought some when I was in Singapore, again, because I was buying quite a lot of stuff this year. I really need to go on a yarn ban or haul or unhaul or something. These are blocking mats that I got when I was in Singapore. I got 4. No, I got these in Spotlight when I was in KL, Kuala Lumpur in January. I got these. And I got them because I thought, you know what, it's time for me to upgrade my knitting blocks, my blocking mats, because I've been using kid blocking mats the entire time. But I kind of prefer my kid blocks. These were expensive. I only got 4 and they were like $20 or something. They were definitely a lot more expensive than the kids blocks, and I got 26 of them. They look pretty in theory, but then you can just see all the pins on, and then it just ruins the aesthetic. And then I also noticed that, yes, this is in inches, but I don't think these inches are actually that accurate, especially if you pair them together. They're not as accurate as you think they are. Whereas, yes, these kid blocks that I've been using, they have their own disadvantages, particularly because you can see, like, these are for kids, okay? You can take them out. They fall pretty easily. But all things considered, I spent probably about $20 to $14, about $14 or $20 for these blocking mats. I got 26, and they have been pretty effective in drying out my knits whenever I'm blocking them. Sometimes they do get annoying, I will admit, but overall, I think they're a perfectly fine alternative, especially if you don't want to spend a lot of money on blocking mats like these. Because if 4 of these cost, I don't know how much, but definitely a lot more than I paid for the 26 kids mats, then this, to buy 26 of them would be a lot more money. Essentially, this whole video is find cheaper alternatives to things, especially on your knitting journey. This is a very long-winded video. I think we have to remember that knitting is a journey, and a lot of this I have accumulated in the past 12 to 14 years of knitting, and these tools are simply optional. Not saying that you can't purchase them. Obviously, I have. This is just me saying there are some tools and notions and gadgets that you don't really need in the very beginning of your knitting journey. These are stuff that could be built gradually as you go along, as you get more into it, because we want it to be as accessible as possible. We don't need to buy the most expensive things ever if it's only going to collect dust. We want knitting to be enjoyable. We want knitting to be fun and hopefully not waste our money on things. If you disagree or you agree or there's something that you think I'm missing, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. Would love to hear your thoughts. But I think that is it from me. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, I feel like I'll do another video about the knitting essentials that I actually use. Let me know if you want that video as well. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Find me on Instagram as well and TikTok. Just made a TikTok. And I will see you later. Okay, bye.